Welcome to My Business Matters, the Michigan Chamber podcast.
Hello, good afternoon, and thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Mike Alaimo, the Michigan Chamber's Director of Environmental and Energy Affairs and our Infrastructure Policy Lead. Today, we're going to be talking about a really important issue that's pretty much top of mind right now since we've hit spring and pothole season. A time when this is really, hits all Michigans squarely, and that is fixing our darn roads. So today we have three great resources in our guests joining us. Jim Holcomb, President and CEO of the Michigan Chamber, where this issue has been a longtime priority. Rob Coppersmith, Executive Vice President of Membership Services at the Michigan Infrastructure and Transportation Association, better known locally as MITA, the organization made up of the construction trades who help build and fix our state's infrastructure and knows firsthand how bad our roads and bridges are. And finally, Maggie Pallone, Vice President at Public Sector Consultants, a nonpartisan public policy consulting firm known for its quality analysis and work, who recently just unveiled a new report looking at our needs and funding solutions. So thanks so much for joining us, everybody. We've got a lot of ground to cover, so let's get started. So, Maggie, first question for you here, but absolutely want to hear from all of our guests. In a nutshell, what does this report do and what makes it different than others to date? Maggie, the author of this report, so definitely want to hear your thoughts too, but again, would love to hear from others as well.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So in 2016, PSC was involved in the 21st Century Infrastructure Commission, which put out a host of recommendations around how to fund Michigan's infrastructure. In 2022, we actually updated that report at the request of MITA, looking at the road funding piece of it. And our recommendation in our report found that not only is our roads getting worse, that it's costing a lot more money to update and fix these roads. So the governor and others have talked about the need to increase the increase the gas tax to fund roads, and the number that she was pushing out was around 39 cents. Our report just 6 years later is showing actually that need has increased to almost 74 cents per gallon, with a gap of around $3.9 billion annually to fix our roads.
Wow, really, really big number there. And Rob, why does this matter? Why is tackling this problem so important, and when it should be the state's top priority?
Yeah, good question. I think it matters to every part of the residents of Michigan, commerce, all the things that Jim's interested in. But our members see day in and day out that there's just a slide in this area, that there's more work to be done. Their projects could extend for miles, except for they're only building them for a mile here, 2 miles there. They see the Band-Aid effect that's going on right now with our infrastructure. And so it's come to a head for us. And from MITA's perspective, we need to bring it to the legislature and the attention of the public. And you can't do that without a starting point, and that's why we decided to reboot the PSC report.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think that Band-Aid approach metaphor we hear all too often. And I do think that the legislature, there seems to be some acknowledgement of that, or, depending who you talk to, strong acknowledgement of that. But this has also been an issue we've been talking about for a long time. There's been, a variety of approaches suggested, variety of fixes, but problem just seems to be growing. What gives?
Well, I don't think there's any sense of anyone in the legislative process who doesn't believe it's a problem, but we've known that for decades. The problem is always the political will to make the changes we need to have a stable funding structure and to understand that this is truly one of the core functions of government, is to provide good infrastructure. And so it becomes a political problem, I believe, more than a policy problem. And unfortunately, politics controls far too often what gets done.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. Rob, do you have additional thoughts there?
Yeah, I just presented at the County Road Association this morning, and they kind of had a similar type question. It goes all the way back to Blanchard. I mean, Blanchard had a bonding program. Engler had a bonding program. Granholm had a bonding program. So we've had a lot of leaders recognize the issue as a problem. Granholm proposed 3 cents a year for 3 years running. That got shot down by the legislature. And then Governor Schneider, even, the 7.4 cents and the 20% increase in registrations, he clearly said that was a down payment, just a starting point. He knew that the problem was much bigger then. And I think, our current governor recognized the problem when she said, came right out of the gate and said we need 39 cents. So anyhow, the problem's been recognized, and I think we need to flip the script on the legislature and make it. I think there's a fear to raise revenue, right? Mm-hmm. So how do we make it palatable to the legislature to say, this is in the best interest of the state?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think some of what we have to do there is we have to educate the public. I think you need to make it a kitchen table economic argument. And I think the public understands, Maggie would know better from her numbers, but just the cost to rebuild a road versus the cost of maintaining a road, if a road's in poor condition, what you can do with it. And it's just compounding the problem because all the Band-Aids we've had over the years. Hopeful, too, just politically, now that we have reformed term limits in Michigan and people can stay in office a little bit longer, hopefully they build not only the rapport and the relationships with each other to work, but they can go back to their districts. And hopefully it will lessen the politics a little bit, that you aren't constantly running for a re-election for only 6 years, say, in the House. If you can have 12 years there, they can take time to really communicate with their constituents and let them know what the problem is and help identify what the solution will be.
Yeah, Jim, I think that's such a good point. I mean, our report talks about this, that there's more money in the system than there's ever been, right? And so there's, I think, this assumption out there that people think that we fixed the problem, right? We've put more money, we have a bonding program, but what we're actually showing is that because of the conditions of the road, it just cost us much more per lane mile to maintain them, right? So what could have been a $300,000 fix just a couple years ago now becomes a rebuild at $3 million a lane mile. And so even though we have more money, our roads are still getting worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and certainly this is not the first time Public Sector Consultants has looked at this issue, and so these types of reports are critical in kind of pushing that education forward, so that we can continue to make this issue a priority. As we have kind of spoken to a little bit, we've seen the governor and lawmakers across the board campaign on fixing the dam roads and some historic, unprecedented budget dollars available on the balance sheet, yet it doesn't seem to be a priority policy or budget-wise so far this year. What do we make of that? Because
it's hard. If you're going to prioritize roads, that means you're probably going to have to not invest somewhere else. The legislature and the governor only have really two solutions. You either raise more money or you spend less somewhere else. And the solution to this is probably somewhere in the middle. And it's finding that right balance. But these people who are newly elected into office, they came here with a lot of ideas, and roads may not have been the first one for them. And especially through their first budget, the public looks and all they hear is, oh, we have $7 billion on the balance sheet. We have all this extra money to spend. They aren't going to be really too enthused about going out and telling constituents, hey, we need X amount of dollars more just to keep the process moving. Mm-hmm.
And I always get accused of fear-mongering, but I mean, the real number is $9 billion a year to maintain our current system. So the gap right now with $3.9 billion includes all the federal investment, the IIJA dollars, and it includes the current Rebuild Michigan bonding program. So when those two things dry up in 2026, the gap gets larger. So it's one of those things like your 401k. Early money's good money. So put in as much as you can, because we've looked since 2015. The last report, the need is basically doubled, and Maggie gave an excellent example because we got away from, the roads got too far away and they needed to be rebuilt instead of maintained. So that's a big gap coming our way, and the longer we wait, the bigger the problem gets.
Well, I think just talking to our members at the Michigan Chamber and also just friends and family members, people are seeing the real impact to their everyday budget as well. I know personally myself in the last year, I've replaced 2 windshields and a tire. That's just a hidden tax is all that is. So let's get on the front side of it. Let's put the money into the system, which also will make it safer. We all want to make sure that we're moving people and products safely around the state, and it'll make Michigan more attractive, economically competitive in the race for jobs. When you come into Michigan, a company or a possible employee, they want to see a well-run state, and the first thing they see is infrastructure.
Absolutely. Yeah, and Maggie, it seems like what the report is saying is that as difficult as this problem might be, we have to take a sooner rather than later approach because the problem is just going to keep growing.
Yeah, right. The number is going to grow every single year. So if we don't do something this year, you can expect that number to grow again, and you can continue to expect that this 6-year doubling of cost makes sense, right? I mean, the legislature and MDOT and others have said they want to build 50-year roads. This report tells us what it costs to do that. It's a big number, but it's a realistic number. It's just math, right? What does it cost to actually build and maintain roads to a way to which Jim's talking about, to which our neighbors want to be able to travel and safely get from point A to point B?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, and Rob, just circle back on your point. I mean, fear-mongering aside, I do think there's a perception out there that the state has all this money, right? There's a lot of federal investment dollars that have come into the state, and so why can't we just fix it with what we've been given, so to speak, right? And we know that's not true. And
that's just a data point. It's a dot. It doesn't project us into the future whatsoever. So we continue to just take a backhill slide or just flatten our curve a little bit and then just start plummeting again. So that's what the bonding cycles, we have to break those large bonding cycles down to a point that there is room for bonding. It can be a tool in the toolbox, so to speak, when the rates are favorable, but it shouldn't be how you run a DOT.
Yeah, I think the public needs to be educated again, too, just on how the budget process works. They look at the news stories and they say, oh, Michigan has a $72 billion budget. What they don't understand is a lot of those dollars, the majority, are restricted. And it's not, you can't just take from this pot and put in that pot. The amount of money the legislature and the governor can really play with and move around is much more limited. So we need to make sure that we're identifying revenue streams that can be dedicated to this and to make sure that we have the money we need going forward.
Right. I think we keep hearing that argument, right, that we have this budget surplus, and why isn't the legislature putting more of that surplus towards this? And really that surplus gets us 1 year, right? Like, it doesn't actually solve the problem. So even if that's what the legislature decided to do, and that's where they decided to put this surplus this year, it's still a long-term funding solution that we need if we're actually going to fix the damn roads.
Well, excuse me, but it goes to the point that with bonding and other things and surplus dollars, everyone thinks they've taken care of the problem, and what they've really done is exacerbate it by prolonging the tough decisions that need to be made.
Yeah, well, Rob, I had a question too. From your member standpoint, do we even have the talent we need in the state to do all the work? I got to believe that states around the country, they're all struggling, and as other states move forward, how many workers are actually available, and companies look at where they can deploy resources. I know many of the industries in Michigan were lacking talent. Are we seeing that in your industry as well?
Well, I think what we've got is an aging industry a little bit as far as talent in the industry. We are attracting a lot of new young people in. But I think the reality is that contractors are smart business people too, and they see the math, and they see that in 2026, how much investment am I going to put into equipment? How much investment am I going to, if I own a concrete pipe plant, am I going to put another wing on just to have all that dry up? And so I think with proper funding, we could turn jobs into careers, and people will invest in more people and find ways to find more people. But right now it's like, can I get by with the crews that I have because I see this waterfall coming?
Sure.
So I feel like our industry is very good at stepping up to the challenge on those types of issues. We have a lot of technology that's come into play with GPS and other things for building roads that have lessened the need for people. But we still have a lot of great paying jobs. And I think, like I said, we can turn those from jobs into careers if we get the ability to forecast further into the future.
And that's a great point, exactly what we want. We want people to have a career here in Michigan. What I'm worried about is if we don't take the steps in the public policy arena to give them the right signals, they have no choice. Their decisions are kind of taken out of their hands, and we need to make sure we don't have an inadvertent negative consequence of being short of talent because we won't invest now and give the proper signals so they know what they can foresee.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Appreciate that. And think it's a great point about, having the technology we need to do the work we need to do. I want to talk about technology in a different way. We've seen this transformation underway in advanced mobility and the move towards vehicle electrification. How does that factor into this discussion about road funding?
Well, I think some of it probably comes down to Maggie and her work. I know from our perspective of the Michigan Chamber, we believe in a user-based model that people who use the roads need to pay for the roads, and we need to make sure that we're getting resources, financial resources from everybody who benefits from good infrastructure and make sure they're adequately contributing to the situation.
And might would echo that. We believe in the user-based type formulas and think that there's a lot of equity in that. I think we're entering a perfect storm here. We have vehicles that are getting better fuel efficiencies. That's no surprise. We've got electric vehicles on the horizon. I hope that going forward we can envision a system that doesn't rely on one source or just, any fuel or new technology comes out can fit into this, whatever we develop as far as going forward, whatever model comes to head. But the reality is that hydrogen could come back. There's liquid-cooled engines and all sorts of things on the horizon.
Exactly. We want to make sure we aren't trying to have this battle again in 5, 7, 10 years because new technologies are coming around that we're seeing how hard it is to do. So if we're going to do it, let's do it right, make it flexible.
Yeah, and even if electric vehicles feel fancy today or like they're in the future of mobility, we need to solve it today, right? Because we know that the president, that the governor, that others, that even our big auto manufacturers have all committed to this 2030 date of having only EVs rolling off their assembly lines. So we have to have something in place today to be able to anticipate what those changes will be just a few years down the road, right? So the report looks at a GPS mileage-based fee, right? Usually called a VMT fee. There's plenty of ways that are doing it. There's other states, there's other regions that are looking at how to pilot this work, and it's happening. It needs to happen, and so Michigan should be ready to take this opportunity to go and pilot some of these opportunities that are out there. There's federal dollars for it. The IIJ and others provided these opportunities for Michigan to really think about what it could look like to move to a vehicle miles traveled tax.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, great points all around. And I know we could sit here and talk about this for hours, but unfortunately we're out of time. So just want to thank you all for joining us today for this great discussion. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Thanks again for our guests. And we hope you check out the websites of the different folks that have joined us today, certainly mychamber.com, thinkmita.org, and publicsectorconsultants.com. Thanks so much.